Right, so we are 3 minutes past. We're going to get going, so we can get through our delightful session today. Let's check the last people. There we go. Okay, so I'm Amy. Never met me before. Lovely to kind of have you here today. Christina and I are delighted to welcome you to today's webinar. It's our first one. We set up Uplift Her to empower careers, but with a lens on addressing gender inequality. So if you haven't heard of us before, now we are a community that started about halfway through last year. And along with our ambassadors, we host networking events, create career resources, and have our Uplift and our Uplift and Elevate podcast. So please take the opportunity to follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, subscribe to our podcast, and join us on our community group as well. We really want today to be an interactive session. So if you haven't done so already, please pop over to Slido. Christina is also going to be kind enough to put it into the chat as well. You don't need to register or anything, just use the code that's there. It means that you can ask questions as we're going along. Also, if you see anybody else's question that you really like, it means that you can also like it and it will put it up to the top so we can kind of get to those questions that you want to ask our guest speakers today. So we've got about 30 minutes with our guest speakers before we then move on to our Q&A at the end. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Gabby, our wonderful ambassador, who's going to take you through our session today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gabrielle Bukaya, or Gabby's fine as well. I'm really excited to be here. I'm an ambassador for the group. It's been really lovely working with Amy and Christina. I'm based in Montreal, but specifically I would like to work a lot with the East Asian and Southeast Asian communities as well. So I'm sort of doing a lot of that, but just being involved with the organization has been fantastic. In the last 10 years of my career, I have been working with a variety of creative industries, and the last 5 years have been in VFX. So I still feel quite new, even though I've been working for 10 years, even though I might look like I'm 12. I am a lot older than probably assumed. So yeah, that's basically what we're going to be talking about, just, being new, but also understanding what the challenges are, dealing with these anxieties and whatnot. And for me, this was important to invite Archita because she is not only a really good friend of mine, but I consider her like my mentor as well, and just someone that has inspired me in the last 5 years as well, just kind of be better each time. So it means a lot that she's here, and I'm just thrilled that you're all here to listen. And now we have your turn, Archita.
Okay, hi everybody. Thank you, Amy and Christina and Gabby, for inviting me on here. I'm very excited about the work that Uplift Her is doing, and happy to be here chatting with all of you. So yeah, I've worked well over 20 years, kind of all over the place in the world, but also across various industries. I started off as an engineer and did that for quite some time before, about 10 years ago, actually a little bit more than that, 12 years ago, I switched into animation and film. So which is a very big switch. I also became a full-on entrepreneur at that time. And since then, I have kind of shifted as of January 8th from specifically animation into just like documentary films, a series films for Indigenous company here in Montreal. So I'm just right in the middle of transferring skills and transferring my experience into a slightly different part of the media and entertainment industry. So that's me.
Well, thank you very much for coming here today, because like I said, you've helped me a lot with my career, and I think a lot of people would benefit from hearing your journey. So that being said, I'd like to start off asking everybody a question in the next minute or so. If you'd like to respond in the chat or even, raise your hand to give your response, we encourage you to do so. The question is, what would inspire you to switch knowing the skills that you already have? So this is a participation question. If you want to write in the chat or just kind of think to yourselves, like, based on the position you are now, or if you have recently switched, what was it about this so-called transferable skills that have given you the confidence or at least the hope that you can move forward? Because it can often be daunting if we want to switch from, one career to another, or even one job to another different role. We don't necessarily know what skills we could apply, but there's a reason why we're there. And of course, for you, Archita, the question is how, in your switch, in your transition, how did you identify your that's a hard word, transferable skills that allowed you to switch from engineering to animation?
So I will say that I don't think I identified my transferable skills until well after the fact. So I think I was just at a time in my career where I wanted to make a switch and I wasn't too happy with what I was doing. And I couldn't see myself doing it for 30 more years. So I kind of, maybe it's something that for all of you kind of in different stages of your career, you can actually think about it consciously and it would help you. I didn't think about it consciously, but in retrospect, I think the biggest transferable skills was probably like relationship skills that you take from one company or industry to another. In my specific case, I would say I took project management skills from one company to another for sure. Finance, I was an engineer, so I had lots of operational kind of strategy skills that I took from one company to another. And you'd be surprised if we're all thinking about what our transferable skills are, you will be very surprised at how many you already have. Because, most jobs have pretty basic relationships with people that you have to build. There's somebody you have to report to. So that's like, organizational skills. It doesn't matter what company you're in. And I think that if you think about it consciously, and maybe this will spur some questions, is that you already have them, even if you haven't thought about it consciously, which I didn't.
Well, thank you for sharing that point. I mean, it is something that we don't really think about, is just how many skills that we've acquired over the years, and I see on the side and the chat, people are also explaining how they kind of see it within themselves. And I don't think that a career has to be particularly linear. And the fact that you're able to see, do I want to see myself in the next 30 years? It can even be in the next 5 years, 2 years. Is this something that I actually want to do for the rest of my life? Is such a big, scary question. But to take that bold step and see what you have, is, I think, an essential part of our career development. We have a lot of anxieties, I think, when it comes to starting a new role, and I'd like to know your thoughts on that. Things that, when it comes to understanding what your roles and responsibilities are, knowing who the hierarchy is and how to structure your workplace ecosystem, how to build a relationship with your manager, how to build a relationship with your colleagues, and the stress of how to manage all that when you're either working hybrid, on-site, or remote, because you have different energy levels, you have different relationships that you kind of, deal with when it comes to getting into this new role, getting into this new industry. For you, Archita, what advice would you give to those who may feel anxious about working in a new environment?
Yeah, that's a really good multi-layered question. Thanks, Gabby. I would say that always keep in mind that you were hired, right? So you've gone through the process, you've interviewed, you've spoken to people, you know what the job is. So you were hired for this role. So there is already a level of confidence that I hope that you can bring to the role because you were chosen for it. It's not like it just dropped on you or you dropped on it. It's usually a process. So, I mean, I think now I'm in my 50s and I have confidence in what I can do. But if you're younger and earlier in your career, at least start with that, that this is the job that you were vetted for and it's yours. That being said, I have also been in jobs and I've also hired. And so this has been my weakness also. I've hired without knowing exactly what the job description is. You know, you need a little bit, you know, you need something filled, or you know that you can fill a role, but that doesn't mean that it's very clear. So I think that part of the confidence that you can have in entering a new role is knowing what you're supposed to do. And also, I think what will help you is sometimes your boss doesn't know exactly what you're supposed to do either. So, so just know that even though you were hired for this, you might have a very clear job description, your skill sets, your boss, the energy within the company, the different people you work with might require it to change a little bit. And that's okay. But um, I think it's very important to have like communication and relationship, a good relationship with your boss so that you can evolve in the company if you need to. And it becomes very clear because what you want is we all want to move up probably in our roles. We want to get promotions. We want it to be acknowledged for the good stuff that we're doing. But it's measured in a, you know, it doesn't have to be quantitative, but if that can't even be qualitatively measured, you're going to have trouble in your job. So I think it goes back to relationships again. So you're hired for a certain role, you're confident that role will certainly shift around because everything has some level of organic to it, but always make sure that whoever you are reporting to, you're able to have a good relationship so that you can make very clear communication about how well you're doing, because I'm confident that all of you want to do well in your job, and it needs to be acknowledged in a way that's very, very outside of yourself also. So that's one part of it. Another part is the hybrid remote situation, which I think, of course, everybody is living right now. I'm very much a people person. The energies are very different when you meet somebody in person. So, for example, I'll give you an example. So, I just started this company January 8th, and I'm the president of the company. It's called Resolution Pictures. And I have the VP finance reporting to me. And she has been in the office once in the last 2 years because she likes working remotely. And so maybe there's nothing wrong with that. But I will also say that because I am in the office 3 days a week, I see that her not being there has a huge effect on the morale, on the trust, on, again, relationships. She has 4 people reporting to her. So if you can, even if you like working from home all the time, I would say that it's important for the relationship side of it, whether you're middle, upper, lower, it doesn't matter where you are, just to show up sometimes, if at all possible. Yeah.
I think, yeah, that's a really good point. A lot of things that say I feel, or maybe others might feel as well, when it comes to remote working is also, what do you do if your boss is like in a completely different country, in a different city? I mean, that's sort of the big question, right? As well, that how do you kind of build that if you're new and you're like, okay, how do I, allow them to entrust me with these skills and tasks? From your perspective, have you thought about how to sort of build that relationship, whether on site, whether, remote?
Yeah. So I will say that just going back to the first question, and the first answer that I made was about understanding like that you were vetted for this company, but also you have to vet the company, right? So the corporate culture is very, very important, especially if your boss is on the other side of the world and you're barely going to see her, um, then the corporate culture becomes even more important, because it's not just like a kind of regular traditional culture where you go into the office and you chit chat. It is actually a very actively pursued culture in the company, right? When you're remote, it is much more of an active process. It's not that organic. So I would say if the company is vetting you, but also make sure that you can handle the corporate culture that is coming with the remote side of it. Because I was the owner of my previous studio, ED Films, and we worked pretty hard to build corporate culture, especially during, the year plus of COVID. And because of COVID, there are people working all over the place on almost every company. So we really worked hard on corporate culture and cohesiveness within the team. And it is possible that the company that you are working for, so this is good for you to do research too before you join. The company that you're working for may work for it on it like a lot, which is, I think, amazing. It is a very active process. But if they don't work on it a lot, then make sure you can handle that if you're working remotely, because you don't want to feel you don't want to join a job for a company that doesn't have a very strong online corporate culture, if we can call it that. And and then you're going to feel isolated. You won't know your colleagues. Maybe you're barely in touch with them. And that might be okay for you. It might be okay for the type of job you're doing, but not. So so I guess I'm adding to my first answer. Not only did they vet you, but make sure that you're also comfortable with the culture that you're going into, especially with all the nuances and complications and problems that can come with joining remotely.
Yeah, there is
I will say also, if I can talk a little bit more
oh,
about that.
you're breaking in and out. Sorry.
Sorry, is this any better?
Yeah, it's better. Sorry, could you repeat
I'm going
that?
to turn my video off. Will that,
Okay.
let's see if
Yeah,
that
maybe that
helps.
might work. But we love seeing you. Maybe it might work.
What I was saying, how's the video? I'll keep it off for a few minutes. Is that better, Gabby?
Yeah, sounds better.
Okay,
Oh,
okay. So I was saying that we hired during COVID, at which point we didn't have a corporate culture and we didn't have this active energy around building it. So the 2 or 3 hires we did during COVID, and animation really had a lot going on during COVID. The 2 or 3 hires that we did make, some of actually most of them didn't work out very well because we hadn't established our corporate culture well enough to integrate the new people into the team.
that can,
I'm gonna
I mean,
try
that,
turning my camera back on again,
yeah,
just to see if it works. Tell me
I mean,
if I'm cutting out. Yeah.
that obviously is an issue, just how do you feel comfortable in your new role, not necessarily knowing what people do what. And also if you never really worked in this particular industry. For me, when I started VFX, I think one of the first things that I did was try to understand what everybody was doing. I've been in a production role, also for the time period of my career, and I always felt that getting to know people via LinkedIn or going to events have been really helpful for me to understand that people are on in the same boat. We have the same anxieties. We want to be able to give each other the equal opportunities to shine through, and that's not something that we should forget about. Building relationships are such a key important thing, and I think even with the distance, sort of like you said, building a culture around you, maybe an ecosystem as well, can help you foster this environment where you can connect with people who can even drive you to learn about new skills that you didn't even know. Like, I had the fortune of working with a stellar editorial team when I was at Monsters, Aliens, Robots, Zombies. And I worked with these wonderful individuals who were so patient to teach me everything about the editorial department when it came to sending things to clients. And it was like, it was important for me because I thought that my job can't work without everybody else around me. And I honored that truly. So I think that that's also really important to consider, that even if you are remote, just learn what everybody else does so that you can see how you can be an asset or how everybody can also learn from one another. Yeah. So my biggest question for you to think about, maybe everybody else to think about as well, when it comes to the future or whatever it is. In the last 20 years, Archita, of your career, what have you learned about yourself? For everything, because it's from being an employer, from being a mom, from being a friend, from being, somebody that takes care of yourself. Like, what have you learned that people can vouch for?
So this is a really good question, Gabby. It made me dig deeper than I like to dig usually. But what I will say is that I'm impatient. So I think that it's interesting that you bring it up as a mom too, right? So a lot of my lessons in life I learned as I have 3 kids. And I think it's patience is what the biggest thing I have learned. Because it is, and this is just my nature, I'm just talking about myself, but I am sometimes too quick to come to a conclusion or a decision. So this, in my earlier days, didn't matter that much because I didn't hold a position of authority within a business, for the first like quite a few years of my career. I was working in like lower middle management. It didn't have a lot of effect on, it didn't matter. My decisions didn't matter that much. But as I've gotten older and different levels of responsibility, I am way more thoughtful before I make a decision. And this applies, I think my children have kind of taught this to me also. But so, and I understand that making a decision without being thoughtful, without thinking about all the repercussions and and implications for everybody around you, for the company, for the children, for the family. I mean, I'm much more holistic about it now. It took me a long time to learn that. So I probably just learned it after having my own company in the last 10 years, and the combination of my children have beat me down in the last 20 years. But anyway, I probably that's what that's what I've learned the most. And I will say that because I've learned it, now I'm running a company, I'm running a full company. Um, it really helps me learn about this company. Like I just take my time to think about things, which I never did before. I was always like super impulsive even. I'm not going to say I was a quick thinker. I wasn't necessarily a quick thinker. I don't think I was, in fact. I was impulsive and I went with an emotional gut reaction. And now there is still some of that that always comes into play for sure. But I think I have just given myself, I've kind of forced myself to always step back and think things through because it has implications on other people and relationships and workflow and all of that stuff. So that is actually a huge difference between me like 10 years ago and me now. I've learned that. And if I can just add a little side note to that, it's always be open to learning, right? So be open to learning things about yourself that are not that comfortable. Because I will say when I was younger, I was like kind of cocky, right? And I was like, I know all this stuff and I can, and how these old people don't know anything. And I was kind of that person for a while. Um, but that you have to like learn that you're not that person, right? And learn that there are better ways to do things. So it's a kind of a combination. Learn to be patient and understand my actions and words have bigger implications that are can be pretty significant when you have a role of authority, and also always be willing to learn about yourself, even if it's super uncomfortable, because it was uncomfortable for me to learn that about myself. And even this question, Gabby, I'm so glad you asked it, because it made me uncomfortable. This question, I'm like, oh shit, I gotta think about myself and my weaknesses, right? And how I've tried to deal with them. And thanks for that question. It made me think about it.
I mean, if there's anything that you've taught me as well, is to always be uncomfortable, not in a weird sense, but just in terms of thinking about your,
it's true.
it's be uncomfortable, it's put yourself forward, look for, be brave in your development, think about things that you would never do, and how you can challenge yourself in ways that it's really just, I never thought that I would like to be uncomfortable, to challenge myself more, but it does help. It starts conversations. It allows you to have different relationships. You joining UpliftHER is like, this is new. This is a whole new community. I'm nervous. I feel this discomfort. I love it, because now I have this opportunity to work with incredible women and allies, and just see what I can do. So the next and final question before we go into Slido is for everybody, really. It's, what can you do today in your new role or in your current career that your future self will thank you for? Because we always think about what we've done in the past, how our past has pained us, or in the moment right now we can feel we're nervous, we're anxious, we're not sure what it's going to look like. But what is it from our past, from our present, thinking about into next week, next month, the future of what we can do now, today, that'll allow us to move forward, that'll allow us to feel gratitude in our career development? So things to think about.
Another hard question, Gabby.
I have to think about it too.
Am I supposed to answer this? Do you want me to answer this?
You can answer this too, actually. It would be really nice to know, like, what you think. Like,
No, I don't want to answer it.
No, do it, because like it might inspire people to think about something else.
But I'm gonna do a quick answer and just say that, again, it goes back to relationships. Don't burn any bridges. Like, it doesn't matter if you professionally don't get along with somebody. If you personally don't get along with somebody, it does not matter. Just don't burn a bridge. That, I think I kind of unconsciously have done that for my career, but now I like consciously do it, because I think our network, even the network we're building right here, right now, it's going to lead to something, right? So you just don't burn any bridges. And that doesn't mean you're like compromising your values or anything like that. It just means professionally, everything is linked, and don't burn the bridge. And I think that has served me well in the last, 25 plus years. And I think it will serve me for the future, professionally. And some of your professional relationships become closer, and they're friendships, and and so for whatever the reason is, don't burn a bridge.
Thank you.
I think that's important all the time. Yeah.
What about Amy and Christina? Can I ask you both as well? Would you like to chime in and give a thank you for your future self?
Thank you for my future self. I think it kind of goes on what Archita said. I think what I've learned over my time, and kind of we say this as part of Uplift Her, is that your career development is 50% based on you developing your skills, but actually 50% is based on developing your network. And your network is going to take you so much further than potentially those. You obviously need a baseline of skills, and you need to understand where you're going. And I loved your points, Gabby, that you were saying about understand not just what your own role is, but roles across organizations. Be inquisitive, ask questions, like dig around, like kind of be the nosy one. But networking, and you can network in so many different ways, whether it is through events, for attending things like this, whether it is reaching out to people through LinkedIn or other forms because you see some work that has inspired you, or some comments that have inspired you. You don't always have to be public about it, but I do think you have to be quite intentful about it. And that network is going to take you in good stead, I think, for having career ability, as we like to sometimes call it.
Career ability. And Christina, would you like to add anything before we go into Slido questions?
Yes, of course. Yeah, so it's just building on what Archita and yourself had mentioned, as well as Amy. It's just building relationships, I think, is really important. And it's not the hellos and the working with people, but it's more engaging with them on more of a personal level. And I think that pays off loads for the future, because if you're interested in people, they'll always remember that. And being kind goes a long way with everybody. So I think those are a few of the different ideas that could definitely benefit for your future self. But thank you so much, Gabby and Archita, for joining us today and participating in the first webinar. This has been fantastic. Love your insights. So we're going to go over to Slido for some Q&As. I think we'll have a couple. We've got time for a couple. So I'm going to start with the first two, because those are the most popular. And the first one's for Archita. How do you know you've made the right choice in switching industries?
That's a good question. There's always a risk of you not making a choice that is advantageous to you. But I think for me, I know I made the right choice because, again, I think I'm telling this too much, but it was my partners. So it wasn't so much that I was switching industries, but I met inspirational people who I thought I could really work with, and who also aligned with the direction I wanted to go in my career. So, and it did work really well for 10 years. So, so I think that's what it was. I think part of it was I knew that I like my engineering days, that I knew I had to change that. So that was already, whatever I went into, it would have been a good choice because it was a change. And the second thing was I met these people. I met them at a wedding. I mean, it was not a professional event. And we just hit it off, and I saw how amazing and talented they were. And they also saw that my skill set complemented them. And we just took a risk and jumped into it together. So I think by default, any choice I would have made after engineering would have been a good one, because I wanted to leave. But also because of the relationship and the people that I met that I had a really good chemistry with, it was the right choice. That animation and film and media was the right choice for me. But it wasn't super intentional that I would go into animation, I will say. My only intention was to switch, not specifically go into animation. So, I mean, that's sometimes you just got to go with the flow, and that's what I did.
Yeah.
And I guess trust your gut maybe a little bit too.
Yeah, we don't do that enough.
Intuition.
You never know who's speaking to you. Is it the gut or the brain?
Yeah, that's it.
And then another popular question is, and again, Archita, this one's for you, but Gabby, feel free to add anything. So I feel bad. That's another question for Archita. But if you did want to get into a new industry, but you don't know anyone, where do you start?
That's a good question. Gab, you want to start with that one? Because you've switched around a lot.
Yeah, I say definitely LinkedIn has been a really good platform for me, but also volunteering, taking time to join cool organizations like UpliftHER. It's been really helpful. Because you know, kind of just, again, this idea of building relationships, you never know who you're going to meet. Going to these networking events as well, you know, whether you want to bring a friend or something to make you feel better, if it just seems a bit overwhelming, that's okay. At the end of the day, I think we just sort of forget that we're all human and that we all are trying to do our best here. So it's whoever you're meeting will probably feel as nervous as you do, and maybe have been in this role for 5, 6, 10 years in the same role, might still be questioning, like, how do I build relationships? How do I move forward with things? So I definitely say LinkedIn has been really helpful, going to events. And yeah, just that's how I would start. Also, maybe getting to know people on your team, again, in other departments, and ask them, what do they do? And also get to know them as human beings just outside of work in some way, to say, like, so who are you? You know, just don't forget the human aspect to allow you to connect with people better.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I would say LinkedIn is a really powerful tool. And I invite you all for sure to link up with me on LinkedIn. Just put UpliftHER in your little note to me, so I just know how I know you. But then, you know, so LinkedIn is a way to do it. But also, I would also say that it's research, right? So if you are super interested in an industry that is outside of your comfort zone and outside of what you know, just research the hell out of it and figure out who's in it, who you want to be in touch with, any event you can attend that would help. And the other thing is not to forget that you have a wide network of people outside of your profession, outside of your job. And I was just talking to my friend who's an engineer, and she wants to go into a different industry. She's like, I only know engineers. I'm like, you don't only know engineers. You know, ask your friends. I mean, ask your what, think about professionally your wider network too. Most of you have probably a wide circle of acquaintances and friends who are way outside your industry. That's part of the research, right? Where you can just ask and find a lot of information. So that's what she's doing, actually. She's going into the jewelry business. And so I'm like, you know, you have a lot of friends who like jewelry, and I'm sure I'm one of them. And I'm sure you can, you know, you never know how these connections are going to happen. So I would say if you're going into something new, also look LinkedIn for sure, you know, the kind of standard research within in the industry for sure, but also use your wider network and see where that leads you, because it can lead you somewhere.
Amazing. Thank you all for that insight. Well, thank you to Archita and Gabby for inspiring us today. We hope that we leave today's session feeling a bit more empowered in how to navigate joining a different or a new industry. And thanks to our sponsors today, UK Screen Skills. Without them, this webinar wouldn't have been possible. So the Screen Skills Unscripted TV Skills Fund invests in training for the unscripted workforce, thanks to the contribution from the BBC, Channel 4 Sky, AE Networks, and Discovery UK channel as well. As part of today's joining today's session, we're going to be emailing you through a career resource as well. So Christina and I spend time through our own experience trying to kind of break down career development into a more simplistic form so that we can kind of all do it all the time, rather than kind of feeling like it's a massive overwhelming thing. We will also be sending through a feedback form. Like I said, this is our first one, so please do take the time to give us feedback, because we'll be using it with your responses to help inform our next one as well. We also have some incoming events. So our next webinar is going to be on the 20th of Feb. Please join Eventbrite and follow us on there if you kind of want to kind of be the first in the know as to what the subject is and the tickets and stuff like that. And we also have a London networking event coming up on the 27th of February as well. So if you're in London and can kind of get into town, it'll be in central London, and it's a great opportunity to kind of meet some people there as well. And last but not least, We have loads of things going on and Uplift Her. Like we said, we are a community and we're here to try and help people navigate their careers and look at kind of the gender inequality side of things. Please do follow us on LinkedIn and Insta. We have a group on LinkedIn as well. So not only follow the company page, but follow our group page as well. We have a podcast where we speak to some amazing women about their career journeys, and you can kind of get some great tips and hints, like kind of in how and inspiration from that as well. And if you're interested in playing a bigger part in Uplift Her, like somebody like Gabby and Archita, then email us, because we would love to hear from you as well. So that'll do. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you go and have a great rest of the day, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.